Hello, my darlings. Madam Raven here with a fascinating story for your cold winter nights. This one by Bandy, entitled Creature Comforts. This is a love story, certainly one of many in the world, but possibly unique in circumstance. Few will believe this tale to be true, nor do I expect it to be accepted en masse. I mostly dictate these words now to record my fading thoughts while they are still fresh in my mind. Let me state that in my many years of life, I had never encountered any representative of the supernatural realm. As a matter of fact, previously I might have been described as a rigid skeptic myself. I had always dismissed the ghost tales of others as willful flights of fancy or scientific misunderstandings. One's imagination and atmospheric anomalies can partner to produce vivid hallucinations for those inclined to accept them. Frankly, I believed those who told supernatural stories. I just didn't accept their conclusion of the events. One day, a few weeks ago, that changed for me. This is my story. This winter has been a particularly harsh one for me. Admittedly, living in a secluded 3-room cabin can be very lonely and depressing by itself. During the bitterly cold nights, there is no greater sense of isolation, and when the snow storms rage, there's nothing to do but wait for it to be over. Fortunately, I had the good sense to make sure the woodpile was well stocked in advance. Survival in the wilderness depends upon being prepared. The fireplace requires regular firewood replenishment in the middle of the night. Otherwise, only smoldering embers remain in the morning. The long nights do not afford much in the way of personal entertainment either, to be honest. My nearest neighbor is more than 6 miles away, and I only travel to town once a month for supplies. I do have my collection of cherished classic books, but reading by candlelight can be tedious on the eyes after a while. Once the masterfully crafted words run together in the flickering firelight, I usually surrender and retire for the evening. After loading up the hearth with as many logs as possible, there is only an old man left to his thoughts. Many a night I've contemplated my life, nestled beneath the woolen blankets. A few weeks ago I was awakened abruptly. I sensed I was not alone, but could see nothing in the post-fire darkness. As I waited for my eyes to adjust, I listened in terror for signs of movement in the room. I only heard the crackling of fading embers and my frantic heartbeat. In the enchanted haze of twilight, where reality and dream unite, I assumed it had been my imagination until I felt the covers shift at the foot of the bed. Slowly, an unknown thing crept underneath the covers, making its way towards my cowering form. All the hairs on my skin stood on end as my bed was invaded by an unseen thing in the darkness. As much as I hoped to be dreaming, I was convinced that I was fully awake. The sinister form slithered up to the top half of the bed until it was a mere 3 feet away. I lay paralyzed with fear on the other side of the mattress. For an eternity, I remained as still as a felled log, scarcely daring to breathe. My unknown companion made no aggressive moves toward me, but I was still too frightened to rock the boat. There is all manner of wildlife in these remote woods. I share the valley with bear, deer, wolverine, polecats, and many other animals. But the creature that crawled into my bed wasn't likely to be any of them. From the general outline I could make out, my uninvited bedmate was human. I didn't know what to make of such a brazen intruder. I would have gladly shared my fire and home with a stranger in need, but I wasn't even consulted. I didn't dare rise to put another log on the dying fire or to get away. I pretended not to even be there. Coincidentally, the bed grew warmer because of the stranger's body heat. It was an odd trade-off. Incredibly, I must have drifted off at some point. When I opened my eyes, morning had broken, and I was alone in bed. Like a shot, I jumped up and grabbed my trousers. An inspection of my front door revealed that it was still bolted from the inside, and that everything else appeared to be secure. Outside, there was no human or animal tracks in the fallen snow. With a disbelieving grin, I decided that the whole experience was just a particularly vivid dream. I resigned to worry about real things. The events of the previous night were all but forgotten when I went to bed. It was with a terrifying sense of déjà vu that I awoke with the same prickly feeling on my skin. An amorphous black form stood between me and the dwindling fire. Icicles of fear coursed through my veins. Unable to move, I gripped my covers tightly. It lifted up my blanket at the foot of the bed and began to crawl under. As my eyes adjusted, I could see the large lump of the bed covers shift towards the top edge of the headboard. As before, my nocturnal visitor migrated towards the opposite side of the bed. An electric charge of fear and desperation filled the air. I sought to find a scream, but it was trapped at the very bottom of my throat. Instead, I remained there, unable or unwilling to flee. To my utter dread, my bedmate's body was a full degree closer to mine than before. I was already at the very edge of the mattress. There was no more ground to yield. Ours was an uncomfortable, breathless truce. The next morning I found the other side of my bed unoccupied. As before, there was no visible signs of intrusion throughout the cabin. Yet I knew both experiences had been absolutely real. If the visitor had malicious intent, there was plenty of opportunity to harm me. I reasoned, unconvincingly, either before I awoke or later as I slept fitfully beside it. That circumstantial evidence was somewhat calming, but I was still frightened about how the thing came to be in my home and what its motives were. Not knowing was the worst. As the sun set that evening, I tried to prepare myself for a likely repeat of the previous 2 nights' chilling events. I made a personal promise to assert myself this time. I fully intended to question the dark intruder about its unknown intentions, if my dwindling courage didn't abandon me. I hoped to witness its stealthy entrance into my home, but I must have dozed off. To my skin-tingling astonishment, my new companion was already sequestered beside me when I awoke. At such a close proximity, I could even detect a distinct personal aroma. There was a lingering hint of fireplace smoke, alongside an unmistakable feminine scent of honeysuckles in bloom. She cozied up to me by slowly inching across the mattress until her soft form was firmly spooned against my own. The relative safe boundary between us was gone. Her flesh was warm in a way that I could not fathom. Her Her skin was like fine silk, and her figure was intensely pleasing to a man unaccustomed to female company for many years. Despite those notable, agreeable details, I still bristled at being so imposed and intruded upon. I was perched at the very edge of the bed and prepared to bolt from the bed if necessary. The room was dark, and I could only make out the faintest hint of her bewitching outline. Finally, I summoned up the courage to confront my phantom guest. Who are you, and why are you in my home? I squeaked out, almost apologetically. There was only a brief pause before her succinct response. I have felt your loneliness pervade these woods for many years. I am here to be your nighttime companion if it pleases you, but do not ask too many questions. You may not like the answers. Her voice was petal soft, yet self-assured and incredibly charismatic. The strange heat that radiated from her body made me temporarily forget about the neglected fire. How did you get in? I managed to ask. I came in through your chimney, she responded emotionlessly. While I realized that none of the circumstances were ordinary, hearing that my visitor somehow swooped in through the fireplace was temporarily very sobering. It was undeniable evidence of supernatural activity and initiated the erosion of my sanity. Are you human, or... I didn't dare finish my sentence. I was too terrified at the thought of any other possibility. Once I was human, a very long time ago, she began in earnest. But now, I am a different creature, but hopefully my current form is still pleasing to your touch. You must never light a candle or add logs to your fireplace when I am here. You would not want to see me in the light. Do you understand? As if witnessing an actor in a play, I heard myself respond that I accepted her rule as it was set forth. My hollow voice sounded disconnected from its consciousness. She promised to keep my body warm, instead of me having to manage the hungry fire each night. The logical part of me feared freezing to death during the height of the frigid cold, but I was already smitten. The warmth radiated from her flesh was absolutely tantalizing. It was like an alcohol-induced euphoria in the pit of my stomach, which I could not escape from. That night the fire completely died out. Luckily I survived to see the morning light. The bed was still warm where she had slept, but she was gone. The room was so deadly cold that I had to restart the fire before I froze to death. All during the day I could hardly believe that it really happened, or if she was just a figment of my lonely imagination. If any doubts remained, her smoky wildfire scent lingered in the bed as proof. I felt lightheaded and terrified at the thought of having creature comforts with a being of supernatural origin. It was madness personified, but regardless of what she was, I was completely obsessed and hooked. I desperately craved to have her lithe form beside me again. I came to realize that she only came when the fire was dying, so I resisted stoking it so that it would die down. When she finally came, it was as if the room had a raging forest fire, but the truth was that I was in real risk of freezing to death. She snuggled beside me, and all I could think of was her. In the pitch darkness, I told her about my hopes and dreams. I caressed her body, and we made passionate love many times. My flesh tingled as if every nerve ending was fused together. Before I drifted off to sleep, I asked what her name was.
I am whoever you wish me to be. Call me any name that you desire, she demurred.
How about Eurydice? I suggested pensively. She was the beloved wife of Orpheus in Greek mythology. She was bitten by a serpent and died, but her husband loved her so much that he went before Hades and begged for her to be returned to the land of the living. Feeling pity for Orpheus, Hades granted his special wish, but with one stipulation. It was that he wasn't to turn around and look at her until they reached the surface. Just before they made it out of Hades, Orpheus no longer heard her footsteps behind him and made the mistake of looking. Because of his human failure, she had to return back to the land of the dead forever.
Clever and very fitting, my love,
she agreed.
I shall forever be Eurydice for you.
I drifted off to sleep and awoke alone again in the morning. As before, the temperature inside the cabin had dropped to dangerously cold. I had to start a fire quickly before hypothermia set in. I was drained of strength and weak as a kitten, but still consumed by my giddy obsession for Eurydice, my demonic seductress. Soon, even eating became unimportant. I was numb to the mortal needs of a human being. I didn't even go outside to bring in wood because a fire would only delay my time with her. Even as I felt my strength and stamina slipping away, I didn't care. For the next few weeks, I basked each night in her intoxicating flame and withered further away from reality. She is a succubus, bewitcher of men and devourer of souls, draining my will to live and slowly destroying me. I fear my time is nigh. I do not eat, I do not drink. I only live now for my short hours with her each night. She has consumed my mind and body. Soon I will have no more of myself to give. I know that I am dying, but I cannot resist this internal conflict. These are possibly my last words, so I wanted to share my story with the person who finds my lifeless body. With good fortune, I'll be with Eurydice in the afterlife. Signed, James, Orpheus, Singletary. So quoth this raven.